Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Vectra podcast channel. Today we have a new face, Gary from the professional services team. Do you want to just say a quick hello, Gary?
Hi, yeah. Thanks, Zoe, for having me on. Gary Ruiz, VP of Professional Services. I'm glad to be doing this podcast with you.
Amazing. And today we have some really, really awesome things to talk about. Vectra MXDR is expanding our capabilities. We're adding more, basically. So why don't we tap into what Vectra MXDR, and Gary, I want you to kind of walk us through just an overview of what our MXDR service is.
Yeah, when I think about MDR and MXDR, which evolves as new technologies and capabilities are created, is really three pillars: the management pillar, the monitor pillar, and the response pillar. From a management perspective, that's really ensuring that your tools and capabilities are deployed in the right places, are configured the way they should be configured, and overall are going to be valuable for you when trying to detect and respond to attacks, which really leads into the monitor pillar. That's really having eyes on glass 24/7 to ensure that any detections or alerts that are triggered are reviewed and triaged by the team of analysts, which in some cases will turn into investigations. And through
Mhm.
those investigations, really the third pillar is the response pillar. So we
Right.
know our technology's detected something. We know it's something that needs to be acted on. So really responding is critical to that, whether it's simple actions such as blocking an IP or domain that has been detected, whether it's locking down an account that you see the adversary using, or maybe quarantining a host. Those are typically pretty default response actions. But the other part is being able to remediate what has been
Mhm.
detected. We have an endpoint solution, an EDR solution. Remediation really becomes a key part of that. So being able to remotely remediate whatever has been done on that endpoint. And so with those three pillars, it really gives you a pretty robust MDR, extended detection and response solution, which is what we're doing here at Vectra.
Amazing. And I want to kind of to talk about that point between MDR versus MXDR. What makes MXDR an extended version of MDR?
Traditionally, MDR is one or two technologies, where
Mhm.
XDR, which became a really kind of acronym that was common a year, 2 years ago, and it's evolved over time. It's really the ability to not just use one or two technologies or capabilities, it's
Mhm.
to continue to add to those. A lot of customers use a variety of different technologies, and so for here at Vectra, it's having an adaptable model and being able to extend using other technologies as customers need to use those.
Amazing. I think that kind of leads us to our next topic here, which is our expanded capability. Because I hear that there's an additional uh capability to work with more technologies. Do you want to walk us through our newly added capabilities?
Yeah, yeah, thank you, and happy to. As MDR and MXDR here at Vectra has grown over the past couple of years, we really want to do more for our customers. So the first is threat hunting, being able to use the visibility and capabilities that we have with our technology, leverage threat intelligence feeds, whether it's through other companies and using those, or some of the open source intelligence, using some of that to proactively identify attacks that may not have a detection or may not have an
Mhm.
alert that is there, and picking up on things that may be anomalous but may not be included in that detection. So that's really where threat hunting comes in play for the customers. The other is being able to expand our response capabilities.
Mhm.
For a lot of customers, as I mentioned earlier, they may have different technologies that don't fit a mold that they're
Right.
really being forced to fit in for others out there. So we do have a partnership with Tynes in their automation orchestration platform to help us do that for our customers and really open up our integration and our portfolio, so to speak, to that,
Mhm.
whether it's a network-based solution, whether it's an endpoint solution, there's ability to create custom type of response capabilities that needed. And what I hear from customers is, we want you to be able to do more for us And so what that additional response capabilities and tool set will do, technology will do, is allow us to do that for them and allow us to really fine tune it customer on a customer by customer basis. Uh,
Absolutely.
and and the last one is really being able to identify and attack faster. So brand reputation monitoring and response is where the team will proactively search for customer creds that may be leaked on the internet somewhere that an employee may have accidentally fell victim to a phish, or they may
Mm-hmm.
have put it in somewhere where they shouldn't, in a piece of code in a repository on GitHub or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or even the domains that are typo squatted and that are attackers getting ready to attack a customer by setting up the infrastructure for a phish. That's really where brand reputation monitoring response come in play.
I kind of want to double tap a little bit more into that brand reputation because I feel like it's not talked about enough. Like, what can you talk us through why brand reputation monitoring and response is so important to any organization?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a big believer in data and using
Mm-hmm.
data to help drive decisions that we make. And when you look at that, 42% of initial infection vectors happen because of credential leaks or
Mm-hmm.
the attackers impersonating a CEO or even just an attack on a brand. That's a pretty big number in that
Mm-hmm.
regard. 54% of the attacks that uh, are actually successful are where customers or organizations are alerted from a third party. Uh,
Mm.
they weren't aware of it. Somebody else alerted to them. And the 54% is a big number because that means
Yeah.
over half of the attacks that were successful were not detected by that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then 75% of them, when you think about attacks and you hear some buzzwords, APT, advanced adversaries using 0 days, the reality is most attacks, that's not what happens. It's the kind of the path of least resistance. And for
Mm-hmm.
attackers, uh, the less work they have to do, the better. And a lot of that
Right.
is really using credentials that have been compromised, that they may have been captured through a phish, or that may have been put into a piece of code, as I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
75% of those is a pretty big number because the adversaries didn't have to do anything advanced. They just had to find
Mm-hmm.
the right credentials and
Right.
use those to get them in the door.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And then I want to talk a little bit more about how brand reputation monitoring and response fits into attack life cycle, like you had mentioned just now. And we have a diagram here to just walk everyone through what goes on.
Yeah. So the numbers I talked about earlier, those are pretty significant. And so the question is really, what can we do about that? How can we, when you look at the attacker life cycle, how can we identify an attack or be proactive to where we're not seeing the delivery or exploitation or even the attackers as they move through, depending on how
Mhm.
fast we've detected it? How can we
Mhm.
move left on this life cycle? And so with brand reputation response, the proactive searching for credentials or typo squatted domain, what we're trying to do is really shift this left to where
Mhm.
you're able to quicker to really identify an attack quicker, but in the same sense, you're able to reduce the significance or damage that it may cause
Right.
the further right this goes. In this case, worst case is exfiltration, right?
Right.
The idea with this is if we find credentials and we proactively uh, reset the password for those credentials or push two-factor authentication through it. The idea is how can we really move left on this, which is where something like brand reputation monitoring comes in play and could be helpful to customers.
Absolutely. I feel like the farther left you go in this diagram where you can stop the attack, the better because right. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's the entire premise of this is being able to identify further left and really respond if you do identify something further left versus, going further right where things get much worse.
Absolutely. I kind of want to break it down to make it super clear to people watching and also our potential customers too, to talk about what Vectra MXDR does for brand reputation and also what customers get. So we have a little breakdown here, and if you'd like to walk through that, Gary.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and these are just some of the high level points on it. The idea here is to monitor a bunch of different sources, whether it's the dark web, where criminal marketplaces are and credentials are being sold, or
Mhm.
whether it's some other source where you see credentials for an organization. Looking proactively searching for those. There may be VIPs
Mhm.
that we could proactively look for, whether maybe it's a CEO or a CISO or a CFO,
Mhm. Mhm.
that credentials are, if those are taken, are captured by an attacker or being sold in one of these places, could be cause a lot of damage. So that's definitely something that we would look for. And the
Mhm.
other is in a lot of attacks, what they'll do when you think about phishing, and I'm sure everybody's received it, whether it's a text or email, there's small nuances that happen. Maybe it's a domain name that's missing one
Mhm.
letter, or it's
Mhm.
a letter is added to it, so at quick glance it looks like it's a legitimate domain. There's a lot of
Right.
technology that's in place and that we use with special algorithms and other sources that we could use to really proactively identify those. And when we do identify them, actually proactively move into the right, which I'll talk about here in a moment, to make sure that if that attack, when the attackers are ready, occurs, you're able to do something about them
Right.
in regard to countermeasures or actions that we're able to take. And so
Mhm.
when you look at, well, what do you get? As I talked about earlier, you have a team that's looking at this around the clock that will not just search for these, but alerts you to it, whether it's credentials that I talked about that could be in dumps, whether it's typo squatted domains that we have seen, new domains that are created that are part of that typically indicate that the attackers are staging the infrastructure for a future attack. The other one, and this is really a helpful one, and it's pretty simple, is certain credentials that you could tag a certain way that will never be used outside of what you're
Mhm.
doing. As your canary tokens is a common one. Being able to monitor that, so if you do get an alert for it or you do find it, you know that something's happened somewhere in regard to your data and your credentials that need to be acted on, and ultimately being able to do something is really what we're trying to do here. So not just searching for it and finding that there's something there, but being able to respond to it. So as I talked about earlier, a lot of customers have different response capabilities
Mhm.
or requirements. And so
Mhm.
what we're doing here is really saying, here's how this works in regard to the monitoring and the alerting and what our analysts are able to do. But here's also a list of things we could do. And as I mentioned earlier, if it is a leaked credential, we could disable that account. We could reset the password. If it's something
Right.
else that the customer has in regard to their response requirements, those are things that we would work with every customer for, ultimately to move further left in that life cycle that we reviewed a couple of slides ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the response options is the key part to Vectra MXDR here because you can, alert, you can like let customers know what's going on, but being able to do something about it really, really locks down the customer's organization, really secures that proactive security.
Yeah, that's spot on, and that's really the intent here. And over time, as I mentioned, MDR has evolved to MXDR, but
Mhm.
really the goal with all of this is to be able to not just identify attacks quicker, but to do something about it a lot faster.
Right.
And the more
Mhm.
time you spend trying to get on the phone to talk to get in touch with the customer contact or to send
Mhm.
information and then have them chase it down, a lot of
Mhm.
times it takes an hour, maybe more, which
Mhm.
for a lot of these attacks is too slow. And so the
Right.
focus here is to be able to respond on behalf of those customers to where that
Mhm.
time that it would typically take is not putting you at risk.
Absolutely. Definitely agree. Well, these are really, really awesome new capabilities for Vectra MXDR. I can only see much, much more growth coming from here. But I think that's all the time we have for today. Gary, do you have any last minute comments you wanted to add?
No, thanks for doing this, Zoe. This is
Mhm,
just, one of many things that we continue to do to expand from a service perspective with MDR, MXDR. And
mhm.
so thanks for having me really participated in this and then looking forward to doing another one sometime in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Gary. For you viewers out there, we have more podcasts on our YouTube channel, also on Spotify as well. Please check it out. We do a bunch of these, just discussions about our product and discussions about cybersecurity in general. So please check us out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Zoe.